I was wearing Roxanne Dawson's Borg suit. It had been a while since there had been any Borg. So they went and they dug up a suit they thought would fit me. They didn't quite know how you put the suit on anymore because they're like little tubes and stuff like that, and they're Velcro in their ways. So it was quite a production to try to figure out how to put the suit back on. We took about 3 hours to do the Borg makeup. And when we were done, I had to go in front of Michael Westmore, and he was like, nope, it's not right. So we had to go back and redo a lot of it. So it ended up taking about 6.5 hours. Hi, I'm Bonita Friedericy. I played Rooney on Star Trek Enterprise, episode Regeneration. And this is Trek Untold.
Welcome back to Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars. I'm your host, Matthew Kaplowitz. On this week's episode, we're going to be hanging out with Bonita Friedericy. Bonita, you may remember from the Star Trek Enterprise episode Regeneration, where she played a scientist or researcher named Rooney who happened to come upon the Borg, and this was chronologically the very first time the Borg ever appeared in Star Trek history. Now, of course, if we want to get timey-wimey here, their first appearance on TV was in Season 2 of The Next Generation, but as far as sequentially in the Star Trek universe, this episode of Enterprise is when the Borg first appeared on screen, and poor Bonita's character, of course, got assimilated. Across Bonita's career, there are several Star Trek connections, but there's one very, very, very strong one, and it just happens to be another person who was also on Enterprise, although maybe a few more times than just once. Many of you might be familiar with Bonita's husband. You may happen to know him as the good doctor from Enterprise, John Billingsley AKA Phlox, and there's a great story about their time on Star Trek together as well that I really can't wait for you guys to hear about. But beyond Bonita's time on Star Trek Enterprise, she's done plenty of other things, and a lot of folks out there will certainly recognize her as General Diane Beckman from Chuck, a series that I admittedly didn't know a ton about, unfortunately, but I got a good education here. I know a lot of folks out there love that show, and after talking to her, I feel like I got some homework to do and a whole lot of binging to do as well. So go ahead and get cozy, take off those winter jackets, and watch out for those Borg nanoprobes. Let's go ahead now and get up close and personal with Bonita Friedericy and learn all about her life and times on Star Trek Enterprise and beyond. But before we get into today's interview, I want to ask you guys, are you following Trek Untold on social media? If you're not, you can go ahead and follow us on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and heck, even on TikTok, all at Trek Untold. That's one word, no spaces, no hyphens. The only space in Trek Untold is the cosmos around us. If you're in a position to help financially support Trek Untold, check out our Patreon page at patreon.com/Trek Untold. For as little as $1 a month, you can help support this show financially, keep us going at warp speed all the way through. And joining at higher benefit levels will give you additional perks, including advanced access to episodes, the ability to ask some of my guest questions, and a whole bunch of other things. Make sure you subscribe to this show, whether that's on the audio platform of your choosing or on YouTube, where the video version of this show lives. And speaking of, make sure to check out our YouTube channel more frequently for episodes of our new mini show, Tales from Trek Untold, as well as other sci-fi goodies. And of course, don't forget to leave ratings, reviews, comments, and whatever you can do no matter what platform you're on to enjoy this podcast and show others that you're digging it too. Links to all these things and more will be in the show notes, including my Amazon storefront where you can pick up any Star Trek or sci-fi related merchandise for me or other things out there, and anything else that I'm working on these days, because who knows what the heck I'm doing these days. But all that information will be found in the show notes for this week's episode. With all that said and done now, let's get this week's episode started up. Computer, access interview file. And welcome back to Trek Untold, and joining us right now is a character actress who you have seen in over 100 films and television shows, some of which we're going to get into today, but for Trekkies, she was among the first in the Star Trek universe to learn how futile resistance really was. Bonita Friedericy, welcome to Trek Untold.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me here, Matt. This is great.
I'm very excited to chat with you here. You know, I spoke to your husband, Mr. Billingsley, a little while ago, and that was so much fun.
Mr. Billingsley as well, by the way. But
Yeah.
go on, yes.
And he was so great to talk to, and like part of that was my sly way of thinking eventually I want to get you on my show too. So I'm happy we got now full circle. I got Bonita on the show. I'm excited. So I want to jump into things here and ask you, Bonita, first question I love to ask all my guests, and that's
Yes.
what's your earliest memory of Star Trek? Were you a fan of the series growing up?
So I'm going to reveal my age here. I was born in 1961, and so it was running. It was definitely, on TV in our house, and my father loved watching it. And so, yeah, I grew up watching the original series, deeply implanted in my memory. And actually, it's funny, when I was young, my dad looked a little bit like William Shatner, so there was sort of like this, like, thinking all men look like William Shatner. I'm not sure, but anyway, yes.
I hear sometimes they do. Yeah, it's just a thing we do. We just randomly transform into Shatner. It
Yes.
happens every now and then. Were you a fan of like sci-fi shows as a kid too, or
I watched Land of the Giants. I watched Lost in Space. I had a big crush on Billy Mooney, and actually the robot, Danger, Will Robinson, Danger. And I grew up reading lots of science fiction novels. I love science fiction and fantasy. If people remember Andre and Mary Norton, who were actually the same person, that sci-fi writer when I was young, loved. So yeah.
I like how we're only a few minutes into this and we're already getting into the literary stuff because folks are watching the video stuff. They've seen this backdrop before, but I just love all the books that are behind you guys right here.
Oh, yeah, there are a lot more where they came from. I think John and I asked him the other day, I think we have about 15,000 books. He
Wow.
is an extraordinary reader, and he really could have been a librarian. So,
Well, I
yes.
look forward to the day that you guys open up your house as a library because you might as well at this point. I mean, you're stocked enough for it.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. It's like, why not? I mean, they're great books. He actually does. I mean, they're not first editions or anything like that. They're all 50-cent dollar books and stuff like that, from wherever we stop, but it's quite a collection.
Well, that's what matters most, that the books are well loved. That's how you know it's a good book.
Well, if you see, there's these are actually rolling carts that I got John about 10 years ago so that he can roll them out so he can see the books behind the books so that they don't get lost and feel lonely.
Brilliant. That's a good way to do it. All right, so Bonita, let's keep going here. I want to dig a little bit deeper since we're talking now about you growing up here. So I'd like to hear where you were born,
Uh-huh.
who your parents were and what they did for a living, and what little Bonita wanted to be when she grew up.
Okay. Diving in here, I was born in Charlottesville, Virginia. We lived there until I was about 5. One of the reasons we lived there is my father at the time was a thermodynamic engineer, and
That's a job.
he was teaching at University of Virginia, UVA. And my mother was a 60s housewife. She actually had been an English major and whatnot. She was a swimmer, and my parents met in a swimming pool when she was, I believe, 18, and my dad was 24. And they got married shortly after that. Um, and little Bonita, I remember my mom asked me when I was a little girl what I wanted to be. And I will honestly say at the time, I recall saying I want to be a nice person, which is not aiming very high, I think. And I'm not sure how successful I have been. I did know pretty early on that I wanted to be an actor.
Well, I think you're pretty successful at being a nice person and an actor as well. So let's kind of dive into that. I mean, were you a stage kid at all? Were you a theater kid growing up too?
Yeah. I mean, not professional.
Yeah,
We used to do puppet shows. My brother, who sadly passed away a long time ago, was just a wonderful human being. And was an artist, and he also was very interested in puppetry and doll making. My sister later became a doll maker. So we used to do little puppet shows, and we used to do little performances of like Cinderella and all these different things in our house for our parents. And then when I was 10 years old, we had moved out here. And my brother was in high school, and he started doing theater in high school. And one of the productions he did was Fiddler on the Roof, and he played the Taylor Montell Camzoil. And they needed a little girl, their two little daughters in it. And so he offered me up. I was 10 years old. And so I had my first experience in a um, high school play when I was 10. And then I continued to do theater like in my school, uh, my middle school and my high school, and then into college. I mean, I got very caught up in it. I loved it. I loved getting to be other people.
When you went to college, was that for acting or was that for something else?
Well, my parents weren't sure I could make a living as an actor. So my father impressed upon me that he would like me to be a computer engineer. Uh, so I tried to take computer programming. I first went to Reed College in Portland, Oregon, and I attempted to be a psychologist. I had a rat in a Skinner box. My rat was named Fidel, but I ended up doing the play Picnic while I was at Reed College, and I played Millie, the young girl in it. I just loved doing it, and I met a gal who was in the play called her name's Laura Paxson, and her father, Omar Paxson, was the leading Shaw expert, if you know George Bernard Shaw, in the United States. And he taught at Occidental College, where Barack Obama went at the same time I was there. Um, and she told me all about Occidental College and their summer theater festival, which was a 6-week festival where you performed a Gilbert and Sullivan, a Shaw, a Shakespeare, an original play, and I can't remember what the other piece was, but I got very excited about that. And I dropped out of school and managed to get myself into Occidental College so that I could join their theater program.
So that's pretty exciting because, a lot of folks I've talked to on the show actually did come from a background where they didn't necessarily do acting first. They did something more analytical, like the computer sciences or engineering and that kind of thing. And it's kind of curious because a lot of those skills, and even, psychology, like a lot of those skills go very, very in hand with acting. I mean, have you felt like any of those skills that you learned in that world has helped you in the performing world?
Oh my gosh, yes. And one of the things, for a while, a period of time when I was, I think, around 30 years old, I taught acting to non-actors, like in community settings where they have classes and things like that. One of the classes that can be offered, for instance, is a little acting class. I didn't want to teach actors how to act because I didn't know how I felt about that. And at that time, I was not at all business savvy, but I did love working with people who just wanted to get a taste of performing or being, again, that being someone else, being able to step outside the confines of how you were raised or programmed or however you want to call it, and being able to look into the soul of somebody else. I think it's empathy. I think it enriches human beings, and it was just such a pleasure for me. The students I had usually between 12 and 15 students, and it would be anywhere from the age of like 18 to someone who might be 70 years old at the time. I remember one gal was again like a sort of a very scared, timid woman, probably about 40 years old, who was a housewife, quote unquote, in her. That's how she introduced it. And the way I taught my class, it's like, bring to me what you would like to do, what you'd like to explore. And she just wanted to step outside herself. And we worked on a scene with her and another guy, and she became like this little fierce tiger. She just, when she got to perform the scene in front of an audience with her husband in it, she just let it rip. And it was really interesting to see her reaction to the strength in herself and her husband's reaction to seeing this different side of her that she hid from him. She didn't hide, but she hadn't had access to or permission to explore. So, I think psychology, I think, you know, all of the tools that allow you to step outside your own, I guess, way of being and look into the souls of other human beings is terrific.
That's a great way to look at it. And then I got to throw that question your way too. I mean, what do you get out of acting? What has made acting so attractive for you growing up and to choose this as a profession? There's got to be something in you that like demanded this type of performing art. So what was it?
Well, absolutely that. And I also was a substitute teacher while I was doing theater, and I did that for about 13 years on and off in Los Angeles, which is not easy. Um, And one of the things I discovered as I sort of settled upon teaching subbing for middle school, and I ended up at one particular school and I would teach long-term classes. And as I got to know my students, I loved that age group, that 12, 13, 11, 12, 13 year old.
Tough age group
But
to
it's
work
funny,
with.
whenever I say to people that that's the age group I taught, people usually go, that was the worst time of my life.
Yeah. So I was just gonna say that. Yeah.
Well, I'm so sorry because I wish we all could like turn to you and say, that's you. That was when you were discovering who you were, where you were the center of your universe. What I always observed is you're kind of a kid and you're trying to be an adult. So I would see these young ladies trying to be so mature in their outfits and things like that, who would have like Hello Kitty purses and little dolls with them and stuff. And it's just and such a sense of humor and exploration. And I'm really sad that we kind of kick it out of each other, because to me, that's when everyone should be allowed to find themselves. And I think for me that the attraction in junior high and high school to be able to play witches, for instance, or to play Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz in a little play that we did, or to do um, uh, play Emily Dickinson. I competed in with monologues from the Belle of Amherst, and to be an I Remember Mama and play a girl who grows from 15 years old to 30 years old. It just allowed me to explore. I was a very uptight child. And again, I told you my goal was to be a nice person. So I was very rule oriented and, straight A student, had to do everything right. And for me to be able to play somebody who was not right, somebody who was wild, or somebody who messed up, was just such a gift.
Do you remember what your very first professional gig was?
Do you mean theatrically? My
Well, I
first
don't.
professional gig would have been in theater.
All right, let's do it that way. I'll make a double question for you in that case. How about first? We'll start with first professional theater gig, and then let's work our way up to first professional TV or on-screen gig.
Yes, they're very different because I had intended to be a theater actress. So my first professional theater gig was Tartuffe
Hmm.
at the Los Angeles Theater Center. I believe I was 23 years old. It was a production starring um, Ron Liebman and Jessica. Um, what was her last name? It's not Jessica Tandy. It's Jessica. Everybody knows her. She was in. It'll come to me. But she's been famous in TV. Jessica Walter.
Oh, okay, just Walter. Yeah,
Yes, she was Elmire and he was Tartuffe. I had the non-speaking role of Fleapote, who was a narcoleptic maid who would fall asleep throughout the entire production in the background. I got my equity card, and an actress named Jennifer Tilly. Do you know Jennifer Tilly? Yeah, well, I understudied Jennifer as Mary Ann in the production, and she left the production after 5 weeks, I believe. So I took over her role. That's how I got my equity card. But the only way I could do it was and I did it much better, was by using her vocal quality, because she is brilliant and she was extremely funny, but it was all wrapped up in her delivery. Um, and that show ran, I believe, 7 months, 8 shows a week. And so I took over the role and had a blast. And I ended up doing a lot of theater at the LATC, as it was known back then.
that is an amazing Jennifer Tilly impersonation, by the way.
I can't wait, oh father. Sometimes she sort of talks in a really weird voice, and sometimes she doesn't at all. But I'd have to work on it again. But it was, John calls it I have like a little collection of uh, squeaky voiced women that I imitate.
That's really
Yes.
cool. Now, how about first on-screen professional gig?
First on screen, the first real job I got, I was 36 or 37 years old. You can see there was a gap in there. I was scared to do TV and film, and I didn't know how you would get work.
Well, what was so
I was
scary about it? Was it the fact that you just felt it was more difficult to get work, or was it just that it was such a different world?
both.
Hmm.
Back in that time, the word was, if you were a theater actor, you were too big. It goes back and forth and back and forth. Now I think it's sort of all evened out. But back in the day, it was like theater actors were big, you used your hands, you had too much expression. I think it's the Michael Caine, if you ever saw his acting classes and on tape and stuff like that, or his book, it's like how to look in someone's eye with the camera on you, never move, your face must be small, you see it in the eyes. And it was like, I don't know how to do that. I'm a stage actor. So I was scared of that. I also, I was 36 and, very, very character actor. It's like, how do I even get in the doors? What do you do? And I actually consulted with my sister every day about, because she was trying to figure out how to have a career making dolls. I know this sounds odd, but she and my mom and my brother at one point were high-end doll makers, where they're like pieces of art. Like they would do Don Quixote on horseback this beautiful sculpture with clothing and stuff like that. I mean, they weren't to be played with. But had tried before my brother passed away to figure out how they could become successful doll makers. So she really applied herself to the business of it. So we would talk every day, like, how can I get myself known, you know, so that I can get auditions and things in the TV and film world. And it turned out there were these casting workshops where you could pay a little, like 20, $25, and you go in and with other actors and you read scenes and stuff in front of casting directors. And some people objected to that. My sister was like, can you believe it? $25 to advertise your skill set right there in front of the person that can get you in the doors. And I think she was right. So to answer your question, the first job I got was through an acting workshop, and I played the woman, or Bonita, on Mad About You. I had one line, and it was Helen Hunt and Paul Reiser. And it's funny because that actually was not my first professional job. Come to think, it was my first TV job. My first real professional job is I got a national commercial for AT&T, and which was a huge deal. I mean, it was a lot of money, and it was with Paul Reiser. He did a whole campaign for AT&T, and I was in an elevator with Paul Reiser, and he was selling AT&T to me. So I had done that commercial with him, and then I was on his show. So it was kind of an interesting.
Yeah, that is a heck of a connection to have there. I mean, who would have thunk it, right? Like you're doing this random commercial, and now here you are, Mad About You.
Yeah, yes, exactly. And you're sitting in the chair next to him, kind of going, "Hi, hi, I know you."
So one of the shows I know you're very well known for is Chuck, where you were General Diane Beckman. I unfortunately I never saw Chuck somehow. I think back when it was first airing, I think that was like interfered with my work job hours, so I never got to see it. But everybody tells me I need to watch it, so I need to
I
watch
think
it.
you would. I don't know if you like spy dramedy kinds of things. It's well done. I must say, I think it's a charming show. I thought, yeah, I really was quite happy to be. I felt very honored to be on a show like that because it was very good natured. But still, I mean, the action adventure sequences and things like that. I mean, Manny, I think it was Manny. I'm gonna get his name wrong. Whoever was our stunt coordinator, he won Emmys
Hmm.
each year for his work on that show. I mean, the sequences were stunning. And like Matt Bomer, or Bomber, I never said his last name out loud. Matthew Bomer, he was a huge recurring part on the show. He was wonderful. That was one of the first, I think, for him, one of the jumping off points. I think he got white collar after that or moved on, but everyone was really sweet.
One of the few things I know about the show is that in the original pilot, somebody else was playing the part of General Beckman. So I'm curious if there's
Indeed.
if there's a story behind that. Like, is there what's the kind of reasoning of like how you came in and took that role ultimately for the series going forward?
Well, what I understood from the casting folks was that I auditioned for it. I never knew that it actually came down between two of us, the gal who ended up doing the pilot and myself. The gal who ended up doing the pilot had played my husband. So my husband, John Billingsley, my husband, was on a show called The Nine,
Mhm.
which was short-lived. It was a really interesting show, but it ran for, I don't think they even aired all 13 episodes. It was just one of those things. But I played his bitchy wife who leaves him after like the fourth episode of The Nine. And then the gal who was on originally on Chuck as the national security director, she played his girlfriend in the last episode of that, so they knew each other. So she ended up getting the part. I didn't really know anything about that. I just know that they shot the pilot. She emailed my husband and said, "You know what? Your wife may end up getting this part," or something to that effect. And it was like, "Oh, okay." And so I got a call from casting, and they said that they wanted me to come in and audition for a Diane Beckman like role. And I went, "Oh, okay." So I came in, and I love Patrick Rush for this. They had decided to let the other gal, go. I think she had a different concept for the character than they did. So she had like kind of changed her hair and clothing and makeup and stuff to shoot the pilot, and that didn't go over quite well with them. So casting didn't want uh, the producers to start looking around for other people. They thought I should be offered the role. So they just immediately put me on tape again, reminded them of who I was, and I came in and I started shooting immediately.
Very cool. And that's like, I know it's a very beloved show. And I know a lot of folks who have looked up, things on Reddit and forums and whatever. And like people love the character of General Beckman. So that's really fun that you got that role. And it's still been very, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for here? It's still been something that fans really know you and appreciate your works on. So,
I feel so fortunate. I gotta say, I mean, one of the things I personally love about the show is, and I think a lot of families over the years, families like to watch it, is that the guys are the slackers in the show. The guys are the ones that need to step up and learn some things. And the women are all great, crackerjack, good at what they do. Chuck's sister, Ellie, is an amazing doctor. Obviously, Yvonne Strahovski as Sarah is like amazing and the best agent ever. To have the head of the NSA be a short woman who nobody messes with, I like to call her Diane Chuckles Beckman. I mean, one of the great highlights of my life is getting to shoot a rocket launcher uh, and blow up a building. Great fun.
well, now I got to ask more about that. I mean, because again, I haven't seen the show here, so I don't know about these things. So, like, what are you doing actual stunts and things like that on the show normally?
The main stunt for me was wearing like 4-inch heels and trying to walk and talk at the same time because
Good luck.
honestly, I'm 5'3", which is not that short, but everybody else is 6 feet tall. I mean, Yvonne is 5'11". I remember joking because Trisha Helfer, she was great. She was on an episode, and if you know Trisha Helfer from Battlestar Galactica, she's 6 feet. So like, I'd stand there doing scenes with and Trisha would be like, "How tall are you?" to Yvonne, and Yvonne's like 5'10 3/4, and how tall are you? And it's like 5'3". And then, and if you want to fit us all in the same frame, because Zach is 6'4", I think, and Adam's 6'5", and Awesome 6'4". I mean, it's like Land of the Giants for me. So, in order to shoot stuff, they would stick me on really high heels, and it's like, really? I'm not skilled. This is a skill set I need to practice. I actually did an episode of 911 Lone Star a year and a half ago or something, where I played the mother of a serial killer. This is one of my favorite roles, I have to say. It was very fun. The mother, her son would kill ladies that he tried to date. He'd kill them in the abandoned house next door to their house, and there was a tunnel, and he'd bring him over, and the mom would bury him in the backyard. But she was sort of like Susie Homemaker. She
Hmm.
would sing little songs and stuff like that. I ended up zip cording the police officer who suspected my son. I zip corded him to my sink, and proceeded to kind of fall in love with him and feed him cookies and things like that. But they showed, because he was zip corded to the sink, they would show my feet from time to time from his perspective. So they put me in like 4.5-inch heels. And it's like, what you don't realize, it's really difficult to act in high heel shoes. And I send out admiration to all, male, female, anyone alike, who has to work in heels like that, because you're crouching and standing up, which kills your thigh muscles.
Hmm.
And you're doing it over and over and over again, and you're trying not to topple, and you're trying to move quickly and look like it's nothing. So anyway, those were the main stunts I did as General Beckman, but I did fire off a rocket launcher at one point too, which was a joy.
I got to look that one up now. I mean, overall, were there like really challenging days on set, or is there a day that like really stands out to you as like whether it was having to wear really painful heels or doing something that was really difficult to do? I mean, were there any days on set that were just very challenging playing that part?
Well, yes, for a couple of reasons. So it morphed and changed over the 5 seasons that we did the show. In the beginning, I was with my cohort was Tony Todd. He was playing the head of the CIA. Tony Todd is about 6'5". So again, they shot things differently back then. So they would try to get both of us in frame. So I would be sitting on like four cushions. And if you notice, he's always leaning down and
Hmm.
over as they try to get us. And when you're on cushions, it can be a little like, whoa. And also we were sort of like Peter Graves writ verbal for Mission Impossible. So we're sending them on their missions or scolding them. We were the adults in the room, right? kept the missions on task, and they could do wild things, but we'd always come in and scold them, or but bench them, or try to get them out of trouble. So it was a lot of technobabble. It was like the Afghanistani Wolverines are out with their Blade Runner, blah, 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 and you had to spit it out like it was nothing. And I remember one episode, Adam Baldwin corrected one of the writers and said, it's not Waziristan. That makes no sense. It has to be like, I don't remember what country was substituted, but it was not easy to pronounce. And it's like, was my lines. It was this huge monologue. And it's like, you do know, I just worked all week so that I could just spit these words that don't normally come out of my mouth, just spit them out. And you just changed the word in the middle. And it's like, I watched Adam melt down once because he had to do a very complicated line with Techno Talk, and he could not get it out either. It's just, it can be very frustrating, and you dig yourself into a hole. The more you can't do it, the more you can't do it, and you can't change the words. So that was always a bit challenging. And it also, my area, once Tony Todd was no longer my partner, and it was just General Beckman on her own, my desk in my office, because I was usually on a monitor, they would let me out of the monitor and I'd walk around sometimes. But in the beginning, I was strictly on a monitor. My area would change where they would put my set because they could do it really easily. So once I ended up in the corner by craft services, and there were like 40 people trying to film me, but there was no room. So it's like just me and then 40 people like all piled on top of each other. And it's like I was staring at them and I started laughing. It was kind of unbelievable. It had its own, there were tasks that I needed to be prepared for. And I enjoyed doing that very much.
And we'd be remiss not to talk about Zachary Levi, because this show put him on the map. I'd love to hear any stories you have about working with this young, fresh-faced, young Zachary Levi.
You mean Abraham Lincoln? I used to call him my Abraham Lincoln. He was just lovely. I mean, I have to say, he's extremely funny, as you know, and he was that. I mean, he made that. I actually think he and Adam, all of them, and Yvonne, they took the characters and had, which is what great actors do. They had the writers start to write for them. If you watch Adam Baldwin on it, his Agent Casey, grunts all the time, but it's the most interesting thing, and that's all Adam. And they started writing in the grunts and the silences and all that kind of stuff. They just to write into his portrayal. And Zach, I mean, was just crazy. I mean, he could ad lib and improv and just make up some of the funniest things that I had ever actually encountered. And he was just always great. He took great care of me. And I always appreciated that a lot. And he loves beef jerky. And I do remember for one of his birthdays, I think I bought him 5 pounds of jerky, which was probably a little bit overkill.
So if I ever see Zachary Levi in person, I'm going to say, Bonita Friedericy says that you're a mensch, and here's a Slim Jim.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey everybody, we'll get right back to the interview in 1 second, but I wanted to remind you all to check out Trek Untold over at Patreon. Patreon is the best way to directly support creators of things you like through a monthly subscription of an amount that you can choose. Trek Untold has a few different tiers already with different benefits, ranging from early access to episodes, the ability to ask a future guest questions, exclusive merchandise, and other bonuses that I'd love to offer, but first I need to grow that Patreon community to do that. Trek Untold has been around since mid-2020 and has grown a ton since then, thanks to listeners and viewers like you. Through a platform like Patreon, you can help me keep improving the quality of each episode and keep bringing you new interviews with folks that make the Star Trek universe what it is. If this community can grow more over on Patreon, I can offer new perks like watch parties, exclusive Trek Untold episodes, being able to directly interact with guests, and other things, but in order to do that, I need to know my audience wants these things. The best way to tell me what you want is by supporting us on Patreon, so please, check us out at patreon.com/TrekUntold today and become a bigger part of the Trek Untold family. And now, back to the interview.
So I do want to also ask about another show that you did a little while ago, which was Preacher. And in that
show,
yeah, you played Terry Loach, which is a fairly complicated kind of character. That whole show is so bizarre, and the comic too, same thing. It's man, if you've never read Preacher, do it, but be warned. But yeah, I'd love to hear about your time on that show because that feels like it's not an easy part to play.
Well, Terry Loach was the no, I mean her daughter, am I allowed like
Spoiler
spoilers or
alert,
what?
yeah.
Uh her daughter, and you don't know why uh until, you know, last episode or whatever it is. And they didn't tell me, but her daughter has been shot in the head and is in a coma. Um, and she is trying desperately to find a way through it. I mean, when, you know, you can see the pain and the anguish, and she is, you know, struggling with this guy who's playing the preacher to, you know, understand if he's that she, you know, she thinks that he's not godly, and that, you know, somehow her daughter and the injuries and stuff is tied into all of this. And I think you may recall there's a sequence where I had to take a baseball bat and beat up a truck and literally a pickup truck and literally smash through windows and stuff like that. And that was not easy. I think I only did one take. I mean, you know, we set it up and I understood where I had to hit stuff, but I'm talking about like bashing in windows and breaking them with the glass and things like that, and just screaming the whole time in the middle of the street in uh, Albuquerque. Uh, I do believe I may have gotten quite a round of applause after having to do that. It was also, I mean, one of the interesting things, Seth Rogen was one of the executive producers, very, very lovely, nice man. But I do recall we were doing a scene where I'm putting lotion on my daughter's head, and where the bullet hole caved in, and they used a prosthetic head, right? So I'm supposed to be putting lotion, and I hear from the, you know, director and the and Seth, I hear, "Hey, can you put some lotion? Just stick your fingers right in that hole. Just stick it in there, like move it around. Okay, keep moving it around. Can you stick it in deeper? Oh yeah." And then I hear wild gales of laughter. Be like, "Oh, gross," but you know, it's like, okay, this is interesting. We're going for a little bit creepy, 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 gross.
Well, that's pretty much Preacher in a nutshell, though. It is very much about that kind of macabre humor, but it fits. It fits the theme.
Yeah, I seem to recall it. What do you call it? Chainsaw sequence, where it doesn't end up well for several of the bodies. So,
Preacher is not for the faint of heart. But
no,
on a less gruesome note, throughout your
it
career,
is.
we already mentioned that one of your earliest gigs was Mad About You, and you've done tons of sitcoms. I mean, you've done Drew Carey, you've done Third Rock from the Sun. There's like Sony, Dharma, and Greg. But I'm kind of curious to know, among those dozens upon dozens upon dozens of sitcoms that you've done, what was like your most favorite experience to be on one of those sets? Is there a show that like really stands out to you that you had a great time on?
Oh, I enjoyed all of them in different ways. You know, it's interesting when you're a guest actor on a sitcom, because you can, you know, at the time, again, I think I said Mad About You was my first TV gig, and I was 36 or 37 years old, and it was like, let me learn. You know, as I told you, I was also nervous about, am I too big? Am I too small? How do you do this? You know, I do remember I auditioned and got a part of the ugly woman on Becker
Oh,
with
okay.
Ted Danson, which was he was really nice. He was great. I loved I loved sitting around and jawing with those guys. But it was funny because at the table read there was supposed to be an ugly guy, and the episode was called "The Ugly Truth," I think, and it was revealing that Becker had a prejudice against people who were not attractive. So he would be nice to the pretty people and mean to the not so pretty people. And so I came no makeup, you know, how I'd auditioned for the thing. And the guy who was playing the unattractive man did not. He came looking really, really nice, you know, all sorts of stuff. He got fired
Hmm.
after the table read. And they brought in another actor. I can't remember his name right now. I love him. I did a movie called Sleeping Dogs Lie, where he was also, that was one of my favorite. I loved working on that movie. That was Bobcat Goldthwait wrote and directed that. It's a really lovely, lovely little movie. Um, but anyway, I learned a lesson there, which is, you know, don't you show up for the part. You don't show up to be noticed as the person. You kind of stick with it. So I will say that I was on a strange sitcom that did not last long called Off Center. There, was John Chu, John Cho. Is John Cho the one who's on in the Star Trek movies?
Yep, that's John
Yes.
Cho. Yep.
So he was. If it's that one, I should look. That
Yeah,
might
that's the
have
show.
not.
Yep.
Yeah, he was great. That was like his first thing.
Really?
He was like 22 years old or something like that. And I played like the barfly. Stephen Tobolowsky uh, was guesting on that with me too, and that was really fun because I had known him from it all hooks back together. He's a theater actor. He was a theater actor. His wife, Anne Hurd Tobolowsky, is a fabulous theater actress and director. And they were at the theater center at the time I was. And I understudied all the women's roles in a play called Barabbas, which starred Bill Pullman
Hmm.
as Barabbas. That's when I first met him, another fantastic director. I mean, actor.
I do want to shout out. I wish Steven had done Star Trek because he's one of my favorite character actors out there. I so wish that they found a way to get him onto Star Trek, but that's a different
Yeah,
conversation.
he would have been fabulous. I know, yeah, he's one of my favorite character actors too. Um, so on this episode of Off Center, I played the barfly that he had picked up at a bar, and like I think he played the father of one of the guys in the show, which is why he uh, was there in their apartment. And you just see these red shoes sticking out from under a blanket that he gets up out of, and I'm under the blanket. So I get revealed, and I'm in this strange little outfit, like a little leopard skin thing. And my favorite line was, "Can anybody help me find my thong?" Which was lost in their sofa. Um, and that was quite an enjoyable experience. I liked working with all of them.
All right, well, Bonita, let's beam into our Star Trek discussion right now. So you were
Okay.
the researcher named Rooney from the second season Enterprise episode Regeneration. This is the one that introduces the Borg chronologically into the world of Star Trek. So let's take this one from the top here. Let's reset to one. How did you get the role? And in this case, also, did the casting people know that maybe you were, married to one of the stars of the show?
Great question. So yes, I auditioned. I was very nervous, obviously, because I was auditioning for my husband's show. Uh, I auditioned David Livingston, who directed the episode and is a very dear friend of ours. I love David and his wife, Dorothy. Anyway, so David was directing. So I auditioned for David and I worked really, really hard on the audition. And as I recall, I physicalized everything, like, because the researchers, we did a lot of our talking while we were roaming around the Arctic or Antarctic. I guess it was the Antarctic. Um, and I felt that it went good, well. I was on it. And David was like, "I want to bring you back for." He didn't act like he knew I was married to John. I don't think he did. So he said, "I want to bring you back later today for the producers," which it was Rick Berman and Brandon Braga. So I said, "Okay." And so when you audition, when you do the callback there at that time, they had a long hallway that had like seats from a theater along the side where the actors were supposed to sit. And then at the end of the hall was the doorway you go in to do your audition for the executive producers. So Rick and Brandon started coming down the hall and they glanced over at me and they looked like they didn't know me. And I got scared. I wasn't scared that they didn't know me, but it was just like, oh, I got to do this well. If they ever find out I'm married to John, this could be really embarrassing. So I was shaking in my boots by the time I got in there, and I did my audition for them and for David, and they didn't say like hi. I met them at parties before too, but it was kind of like I just went hello, and they were like, okay. And so I just did my thing, and I got nervous, and I thought, oh, that didn't go well, and I left, and I went home and I said to John, I didn't get it. I said, honey, I'm so sorry. I was just so embarrassed. And I started to cry a little bit, like, and then I got the call and I was cast, and it was like, okay. And to this day, I don't know if they knew it was me or not. I mean, I never really went too deep into that. I don't know if I wanted to know. But I was cast in the part. I was very excited to do it. My husband would come and make fun of me from time to time from behind the camera, particularly when I was shot and killed. Gales of laughter as I flew backward onto the stunt pad. Um,
Well, we've gone this long without actually asking about this, and I want to definitely get this in there too. I would love to hear the story about how you and John first met. And this is unrelated to
Uh-huh.
Star Trek, but I feel like this is the great place to put it into the interview.
Now, if John were able to hear me, he's somewhere in the house. We have slightly different versions,
Ah, okay.
as many couples may, like from one perspective. So I will say the first time I laid eyes on John, I went to see a production of Great Expectations of the book. It was a play version, and he was playing, if you know the book, Herbert Pocket,
Mhm.
who is the Pip's sort of odd, eccentric friend. So I'm sitting there in the audience watching this production, and his character at one point is supposed to try to box with Pip. That's how they first become friends as young kids. And my husband rips off his shirt, which, if you know John, something's got to come off. It always does, pants or shirt. So the shirt comes off, and he's this guy boxing, and he's throwing buckets of water on him. And I thought, my friend who's the director, we were like, who is this guy? This guy is amazing. I've never seen anyone who can act like this. It was just great. I then tried to compliment him after the show, and he seemed more interested in going out for drinks with friends. So I kind of went, fine, whatever. But then we ran into each other on and off doing those acting workshops I was talking about, how I got mad about you. But we didn't, for whatever reasons, we sort of just were ships passing. It was like, hi. And then my friend Bruce Wieland went out to breakfast with John and a friends, mutual friends. And I saw my friend Bruce later that day, and he was like, "Do you know this guy, John Billingsley?" And I said, "Yeah, he's a great actor." And he said, "You should go out with him." And I was like, "I don't know about that." Okay, why? And he said, "You guys just have the same energy." And I went, "Fine." 2 days later, I'm getting out of my car to go to an audition. It was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for H&R Block in Australia, a commercial audition. And John goes walking by my car to put money in his meter, which he didn't need to do, but he didn't realize that. So I get out of the car. He says I was like sticking my legs out and waving them in the air at him, which I was not. But we walked back to the audition. We sat down because they were reading the phone book. They literally had people reading the phone book because it was supposed to be boring or something like that. The audition was like, we waited for 3 hours. And John had a date that night. So he was really stressed about the whole thing. So we started talking about dating and all this kind of stuff. A mutual friend was watching us and was like saying, "You guys are so flirting." He later told me, he goes, "It was like you guys were just sitting there flirting with each other." Um, so John was done with the audition before I was. And I had just been going, and we'd both been married before, and I had been going on about how I didn't date. Like, how do you know a person isn't an axe murderer? I should have
Right.
said a serial killer since he plays them on TV.
He's
Um,
very good at that role.
I know. Um, or child molester. Um, so as he was leaving, and I said, I don't date. I don't know how you know what you're getting into. As he was leaving, he said, "Can I have your phone number?" And I actually said, "Oh, okay." So I gave him my phone number, and he says he broke up with that gal the very next morning, which he thinks is very, very funny. And then he called me about 2 days later, and he asked me out on 3 dates. He asked me to lunch, and then he asked me to parts 1 and 2 of the play Cider House Rules.
Hmm.
And I said yes, and that was that.
Well, now I'm very curious to see what his take of that is, but that's really cute. That's so wonderful. You guys found each other that way, and that's you guys are still together now, and we'll be seeing you guys in a few months at Trek Long Island together. Excited for that. That's so awesome. I love it when good people find each other.
Well, we feel very, very, very fortunate. I am very fortunate, and yeah, I mean, we 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 do good together.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. And yes, that was an interesting way to also meet each other, I have to say.
So, do you think if like the casting people or the producers found out that you were married to John, do you think that would have affected whether or not they brought you on? Would they have just automatically said no? Do you think would it have played any part in you getting this role?
I have no idea.
Hmm.
I really don't know. I mean, I do know it's odd because John and I have actually worked together. We didn't have any scenes together uh in that episode of Star Trek. As I said, he just stood behind the camera and mocked me. Um, but we've worked together quite a bit over the years. And uh when like on the nine when I played his bitchy wife, they didn't know we were married. That was so odd because so he was cast as a series regular. And then, they cast the part of the wife a few weeks later. And I didn't know if they knew we were married or not, but they cast me. And then at the table read, we were sitting there and we did the table read, and then we got up and we held hands, and somebody went, "Wait, what?" We're like, "Yeah, we're married." And they were like, "No way." And it was like, "Way, yeah." So, I mean, sometimes we've been cast because we are married, and sometimes people just don't know.
Or you can just tell people you're method acting. That's all it is.
I think I'll do that.
Yeah.
I think I will. Yeah, I have to marry everyone I work with.
Well, lucky them. So essentially, your first scene in the episode is you guys out in the snowstorm. And I don't think I've actually talked to too many folks who have been in snowstorm scenes. So I'd love to hear just again what it's like to being on this set for first day. I don't know if this is chronologically or sequentially the first day you filmed, but what is it like to film on one of these like fake Hollywood snowstorms? Because I'm pretty sure that that snow isn't exactly safe to put on your tongue, right?
No, I'm really glad that you asked, because I will offer, because rarely does anyone ask. It's plastic shavings, and they're painful,
Yeah.
actually. You can see in some of the scenes, one of the guys was trying to hold his eyes open and kept getting like little shards of
Oh,
plastic in there. Actually, I was sort of protected, but it was very awkward. If you see the hood that I'm wearing, it was way too, I have a very small head. It was way too big for my head,
it did look huge
so
on you,
that I
yeah.
would disappear. If I turned my head to talk to the person next to me, I was turning my head inside the hood. So literally, I'm talking to the side of the hood. So they were trying to pin it back, uh, and whatnot. And there is a point where the actual Borg, spoiler alert, the Borg body, the Borg that we unearth, it's very dramatic. He's under the snow, and we dust it aside, and you see his face through that. The actor who is playing the Borg guy, he was like a stand-in extra type actor. I think his name was Mark. He was he did, he was well known on set. Great guy. But he was having to lie in this plastic snow while he filmed stuff, and it kept getting into his mouth. And at one point, when I was doing the scene where you see me wipe the snow off of his face, they cut, and he sat up and he couldn't see anything because he had to keep his eyes closed because of the snow. He just sat up and he spat like a huge wad of plastic snow on into my face, which is, he wasn't doing it on purpose, but we all burst out laughing because he had no idea that he just spit it all over me, because he was just trying to get it out of his mouth. And it was like, oh, wow. She said, wiping it off of her face. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Can you spit to the right next time, not straight forward? So yeah, and they had to, blow it around, obviously, so they would get the fans going. How they made all that plastic snow, I don't know if they bought it, if they made their own shavings. I never asked. But it was a very big set,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the sets you've been on at that point, I mean, how was it any different? Because this is a Star Trek show, so it's going to be big for Star Trek. But how did it compare for you first time seeing those sets? And same thing too with the Borg alcove, not just the snowstorm and the research place, but being part of that Borg alcove. What was that like?
Uh, it was cool. I do say, with the instrumentation panels and stuff like that, it's like, anybody have thoughts what I'm pushing or what I can push, or what looks real? I don't, I'm fondling dials and buttons, but I'm really not sure what I'm supposed to be doing. What am I turning on or off? I will say I also worked in the uh, Percy Jackson Lightning Thief movie, and that perhaps is the most enormous set. That was outrageous. And just, I'll switch back to Star Trek, but that was odd because I was turned to stone, and they had this gal from Scotland, I think, who was the premier uh, bust maker, where you have a straw to breathe through, and they do a whole mold of you. And it was really fascinating because she needed to have like hundreds of uh, figures of people turned to stone.
Hmm.
And it was just really interesting to watch that process. But the first really vast set that I worked on was that for Star Trek, and it was like walking into, particularly, uh, that whole snow environment, because as I'm trying to recall, that we had to walk through all these paths that had different, you know, structures and ruins and things like that. And then that whole camp that you can see from above, they enhanced it, but that actually, they did build a lot of that. And it was kind of creepy and really interesting at the same time.
Now, I don't know again how deep you knew about Star Trek at this point, but the Borg are like one of the big threats in Star Trek, and especially at that point. So this was a big deal to see the Borg pop up on Enterprise. Were you aware of the time when you read the script like that this was going to be kind of a big deal? It's kind of an important thing. This is the first time they're shown up chronologically in the franchise's history, right? Did any of it,
Yeah.
were you aware of that? I guess that importance.
Well, yeah, I actually was. I mean, I talked to John about it, of course, but also that friend Bruce, whom I mentioned that introduced or talked to me about John, he's a huge Star Trek fan. And so when John was auditioning for the show and things like that, if we wanted to reference something that we didn't know about the whole universe, it's go back to Bruce and ask him, how does this fit into stuff? And he was like, oh, this is a big deal. And I watched First Contact. I think I'd seen it already, but I went back and I watched that because I understood that that was the connective tissue,
Hmm.
was the movie itself. Um, and that, and I watched some episodes of the Borg because they're great. It's an amazing and it is creepy. It's just great. I mean, they're great villains, and I wanted to know as much as I could learn. I do know it was controversial for some fans, like to do that was not quite sequential. It wasn't quite what they wanted or thought it should be. But then again, I'm the one that watched Star Wars when it first came out, and when they revealed that Luke and Laura, spoiler alert, um, are brother and sister, I was like, oh no, that's not how this world works. You can't turn them into brother and sister. That's not who they are. He's rescuing her. They're supposed to be the love interest, not Han Solo. I had my own little. I got over it, but I remember at the time I was so deeply into science fiction and fantasy and the way princes and princesses and rescuers, how it's supposed to work. It's like, I don't think so. But
Yeah, if we should have, that's Luke and Leia for any sci-fi fans who are raising their fists. Luke and Laura was General Hospital.
oh, did I say Luke and
Yeah.
Laura? Oh, I watched General Hospital too. Sorry about that, Luke and Leia. Now
Honestly,
let's
that's a
talk
pretty
about
great
Luke
mistake
and
to make,
Laura.
though. I'm cool with that. I like that mistake.
Now you do know that Laura of General Hospital is Jonathan Frakes' wife.
I do.
So it
I
all
do.
ties to.
I wish he did Star Trek also, so I could have an excuse to have her on the show.
Yeah, I've only met her once, but she was lovely. She took over a role in a theatrical production called The Baby Dance that a friend of mine was in New York.
Well, how about this segue for something that's not as lovely? Let's talk about that Borg makeup that you had to wear. I've heard
Ah,
stories about the Borg makeup. We had a guest on a while ago, J. Paul Bamer, and he said he basically lost like 10 or 15 pounds just wearing that thing for a week straight. So talk to me about doing that, and what was it like for you? Because at this point in your career, had you done a lot of heavy prosthetics like this before?
no, I did come from a theater background, so like when I did the aforementioned Tartuffe, replacing Jennifer Tilly, I had to have, I had a wig that had been fashioned for me. It was period makeup, it was corsets, and I did a lot of period theater, so I wore a lot of strange outfits and things like that that demanded some work. I remember Jessica Walter used to, for good luck, have me uh, put her corset on, where you have to like literally put your foot on the back of the person and crank the strings and tie them in really tight. She had a New York accent. She'd like, Bonita, come on, I need you. Um, but so so people know I was wearing Roxanne Dawson's Borg suit. It had been a while since there had been any Borg. So they went and they dug up a suit they thought would fit me, and then they had to have Bob Black. Is it Blackman? He was the customer.
Yeah,
Wonderful. Bob.
yeah, I don't remember. It's like Blackburn or something. Yeah, no, I know you're talking about.
Yeah, I just loved him. He's such a doll. Anyway, they had to go fetch him because they didn't quite know how you put the suit on anymore because they're like little tubes and stuff like that, and they're Velcro in their ways. So it was quite a production to try to figure out how to put the suit back on. And then Suzanne Diaz, who at the time was Michael Westmore's daughter-in-law, she did my makeup. Love her as well. But she had never done Borg makeup. So we took about 3 hours to do the Borg makeup because they glue objects on you, stars and things like that. And then they do very careful spray, like a spray paint, where they make it like eggshell. So there's a technique to do it to make it that kind of translucent, interesting bluish white stuff. Um, and when we were done, I had to go in front of Michael Westmore, and he was like, "Nope, it's not right." So we had to go back and redo a lot of it. So it ended up taking about 6.5 hours. Um, but I like Susie Diaz, so we talked a lot during all of that. Um, and then I can't remember his name. One of the guys that again was a regular on the set to play the Borg or, ensigns and in the background stand-ins and things like that. He was like the Borg guy. He'd been in the movies, he'd been in First Contact. So he trained me as to how you walk like a Borg, because there's just that way they have of not moving their arms. And also they called me the baby Borg because I was the shortest Borg there had ever been. And there's a shot where you see me walking next to him, and he's like, again, 6'2", and I'm 5'3" Borg. But he trained me in Borg walk, shall we say.
And we alluded to this earlier too, how you got to basically have a fall. You did your own stunt essentially in this episode, right? When you get killed,
Yes, I was squibbed.
squibbed.
So
But squibbed in this case, not with blood, but with electricity, basically, right?
yeah, good old Scott Bakula fired one off and shot me in the chest, blowing me backwards. So I had to leap backwards and fall onto a crash mat, which I like stuff like that. I mean, I think it's kind of interesting because I'm like that. I like stunt stuff. I mean, honestly, when I was General Beckman, I really wanted a friend of mine named Anthony is DeLongis is one of the major stuntmen, and he's just amazing. And he taught Michelle Pfeiffer how to use the bullwhip in the Catwoman
And he was
movie.
also in Star Trek a bunch of times too.
Yes, yes. And I did a short vampire film. Uh, I can't remember what they're called anymore. And anyway, I had to be a vampire who was fencing, and I did take fencing in college. So I chose the broadsword, and I was working with Anthony and his partner Bob Chapin. They were helping me train a little bit to do some fencing. And Anthony started showing me the bullwhip and how the moves that you use in fencing are the same that you use with a bullwhip. And I was so dying to have General Beckman have a sequence where she used a bullwhip. I just thought it would be kick ass, you know. Never got to do that, but uh, I enjoyed doing stunts if I don't kill myself. So yes, and that was when John would stand behind the monitors, and I'd hear cackling laughter from him and the makeup crew every time I get shot and would fly backwards. And they film it a couple of times without a squib, and then they squib you for the last couple of times to get that burst of electrical fire kind of stuff coming out of your chest.
Have you been squibbed otherwise with like the blood packets in the past?
I've had blood packets both on stage and in TV and film, I believe. On stage, I had to have a blood packet in my mouth because I was in a play where a guy smacks me in the face and then hits my head on a bench. And then
Ah,
I had that blood. But actually, what happened is accidentally I bit too hard in the blood. I mean, it looked like I'd been like my whole mouth had been mashed in. It was you hear people going, ugh, and it was like, oh, that was a little much.
so I mean, I've always wondered because of that, like, what is actually a worse feeling? Because I know when a squib goes off, you feel it, but in this case, and again, this is from years of watching Power Rangers, and in Power Rangers, everybody gets hit and they spark up. What feels worse, the sparks or like the squib exploding on you?
I don't think either. I'm kind of like that kind of stuff doesn't really. Yeah, it's sort of a minor irritation. I think high heels. I got to be honest, it's high heels, and the not being able to stand up and crouch anymore because your actual muscles are gone. I have hit John. We were in what was that called? Fear Itself. There's an anthology thing. I think John Landis was the executive producer, if I'm not incorrect. So John and I were playing yet again a married couple in an episode that starred Brandon Routh. And just if you want to go full circle, Brandon also played a character on Chuck. Uh, and I also was in a movie called Alien Raiders with his wife Courtney,
Now we're going
which
real full
always
circle.
amused me. Yes, I love them too, and it just amused. Alien Raiders is a pretty good movie, I gotta say too. Um, Takes place in a supermarket with aliens. Uh, I was a drug-addled alien spotter because I was on drugs, opiates. I had been invaded by the aliens, but they couldn't take over me because I was on drugs. But I could spot people who had been infected with my eyes. Anyway, I digress. But in the episode of Fear itself, at one point, for various reasons, I needed to slap my husband. I did a real good practice slap. It just like whacked, and everybody like turned around, and John was like, "Yeah, that was okay. That didn't hurt. That didn't hurt." And then his stunt double came in, and the stunt double for John said, because he then had to crash through a glass table, the stunt double's like, "You can't hurt me. Don't worry about it." And it's like, because that's harder to me is slapping another person or doing it to someone else. And I said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Absolutely." And so I went for it and I clobbered that guy. And I saw his eyes just kind of roll up, and then he fell into the table and he was like, "Wow." I was like, I'm really, I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to hit you. I really wasn't. But
That was the day he met God.
yes, or he changed his mind about what he says to women who are supposed to slap him on set. But anyway, in answer to your question, I don't recall the squib hurting particularly. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any stunt. What? No, it's all been.
So, Bonita, when this episode first aired, did you and your husband actually watch it? I mean, I don't know if John likes to watch when he does Enterprise, but since this is your first time doing Star Trek, do you guys remember if you actually watched it together?
That again is a good question. I'm sure I watched it because I even, I did that with when I was on Chuck as well, is I like to learn from my mistakes, shall we say. And, I was very excited about being on it. I know that John and I watched every episode of Enterprise. I mean, because he, obviously takes his work very seriously as well. I think we didn't always watch it on the night. We'd go back later and maybe watch a couple a few weeks later or whatever. I have a feeling we didn't watch it together. I have a feeling I probably watched it and then maybe we watched it again or he watched it by himself later. But I could ask him that. That could be a completely false memory that I just made up.
Well, from what you might remember from it, I mean, do you remember if you liked how you performed and like what you saw?
Um, the honest truth, I felt like I was a little bit stiff. I mean, that was early into me doing, again, we've talked about the television and film stuff. I was a little nervous to be on my husband's set. And I felt like, because there wasn't a lot of character to those three researchers. It's trying to find your place and find your character. And I felt like I sort of gave her, I know that John Short, who played the commander of the three of us, again, he and I later played husband and wife in the movie Christmas with the Cranks. We were the trashy people down the street from Tim Allen and Jamie Lee Curtis. But anyway, John, I loved in the episode because he really tried to give a little fun to his character, and I did indeed try to give like sort of an air of curiosity and excitement to Rooney, but I still felt like I could have loosened up a little more. If I were to do it again, I think I would try to even relax more and see what that did.
Now, do you recall if you had auditioned for any other parts for Star Trek after that?
No, I think that's the only one I ever auditioned for.
Okay, that's the easy answer then.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so Bonita, let's jump into our lightning round now. And I got a few questions for you that usually we call it lightning round, but they're probably the hardest questions of the bunch here. So let's just go on into this here. Best
Okay.
day on the job, Bonita, and worst day on the job.
On which, any particular job or
Any job you've ever
Star
done.
Trek?
Best day you ever had on any job, and the worst day you ever had on any job.
That's too hard to answer. That is, I mean, I love my work. Worst day on the job? Gee, what would that be? I don't know. I I I don't I you've left me speechless.
I mean, if you never had any really bad days on the job, that's a good sign, right?
Yeah. I mean, I was on that was pretty bad. I was on Alias, the Jennifer Garner show, and that was again early into me doing stuff. And I had been walking my tape through. This is me trying to get work, walking my tape through an office, and the casting person was a friend and they liked me a lot and was like, "Hey, you know what? I think we have a part for you." And they said, "Here it is. Do you want to do it?" And it was like this scene. It's so funny you think back on it. It was like Bradley Cooper, Jennifer Garner, all these people, and it was a scene where everybody's at like a big, huge conference table. And I believe Michael Weatherly was there. He was having a little nap over on the side. And my deal was just, again, one of these talking head monologues. I was a scientist or something, but I had been given the part, so I hadn't learned the lines the way I would for the audition. There's that thing where if you're auditioning for something, you work on it, work on it, work on it, work on it. You get the part, you work on it, you work on it, and you do it. And you know it cold with these kinds of lines. That's what I had to do with General Beckman. It's like walking up and down hills trying to learn these lines for hours. I was given the part. I had read the monologue. I'd worked on it, but I'd only had like a day to work on it because I'd been cast and immediately got it. And I remember I had like a major meltdown. Like I could not get through the lines. And that's an interesting thing because you have an entire room full of people, crew, Bradley Cooper, Jennifer, all these people who actually feel for you, but it doesn't matter. You're standing there not getting through this, not take after take after take after take. And it's like, somebody help me. Somebody, I mean, I managed. I finally sucked it up and got through it, but it was like, it was a little bit painful. Best day. I loved working on 911 Lone Star. Like I said, recent my recent stuff. There were a couple scenes that I just really enjoyed that character, and I felt like I really was free with what I was doing. I also was on Chicago Med, and I played the homeless mother of a series regular. And I think John and I work with an organization that feeds unhoused people, Hollywood Food Coalition. And for me to have the opportunity to present a real, like I said, to be another person, but in a very real sense, to be able to stand up and, you know, present this woman. And there was a particular scene where she's living out of a van and her daughter comes to find her because she needs to go back to the hospital. The mother does. And when the daughter drives up, the mother's van has been stolen. She thinks actually the daughter had it towed away, but the mother doesn't know that. And it was just screaming and the pain and the loss of the only thing that she had that had her life in it. Um, and I was able to do it over and over and over again. And it still makes me very emotional. That might be things like that are matter very strongly and make a day for me on a set. I feel like I've done my job.
And you may have just answered my next question by accident here, which was going to be, what's the most challenging role that became the one that you're most proud of? Would you say that was the role, or was there something else?
I'm proud of playing General Beckman because I do think it is a powerful I love to be in this world, the powerful statement of being a woman, one of the women in charge. And back then it was 2007. You know, there weren't that many. I love Anna Devere Smith on West Wing. As one of the to be able to be an example like that, and I thought it was a great show. Is wonderful, but it's right up there playing uh, that role. They all have different challenges.
How about what's something you know today that you wish you knew when you were younger?
I think it really is, don't sweat the small stuff because and because curiosity, substitute instead curiosity for why things are happening. An example, driving home yesterday, John and I were driving from Jackson Hole. I was doing the driving with some friends to Salt Lake City to fly back here, and the rent a car, one of the tires, the pressure thing came on and said it was ridiculously low. So my friends in the back were like, "Oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And it's like, well, let's just see. I mean, I don't know. Maybe, how do we know? How do we know there's what's going on here? And it ended up, we just filled the tire with some air and it was perfectly fine. And that's what I've learned is there's always, it's to just pause and look and see.
What is the most important piece of advice, either professionally or personally, that someone gave you that you still think about today?
I think professionally, and that may work personally too, and it's sort of along the same lines, is just keep showing up. I mean, do the things no one else wants to do. I mean, there are reasons, you know, there nothing is actually as easy as it may seem if someone else is doing it. they're all, again, it's that curious. I think again, it's this thing that's coming to me is just be curious, and just show up every day if you can.
And last question for today, Bonita. What is the
Mhm.
best part of being a piece of the Star Trek universe?
I will be honest, getting to interact with fans, people who care. I think the fandom and the human beings that are involved in Star Trek, there's such a goodwill and a sense of inclusion and taking care, a camaraderie, taking care of each other. I just think it's a lovely world of humans to interact with and be a part of.
And I think Star Trek is very lucky to have you and your husband as part of this series here. And you're also among a very rare group because there's not many husband and wife duos that have done Star Trek together. So that's pretty awesome too.
Oh, we love it. It's fun.
And I will admit too, I'm very excited to meet both you and your husband at Trek Long Island 3 coming up in next May 30th through June 1st out in Hop Hog, New York. Yeah, Trek Long Island is so much fun, and you guys are gonna love it there. I mean, I know you guys are doing the Big Vegas one. We're talking right now, and it's about a week away from the Big Vegas show. But when's the last time you guys have done a convention on the East Coast?
Gosh, it's been a long time. Well before the pandemic, I think.
Hmm.
It's been a while since, yeah, it probably 5 or 6 years
Wow.
at least. I'd have to ask John again. I don't, no, that's not true. Is Philadelphia East Coast?
Yeah, that counts.
I think that we did one in Philadelphia a few years
Hmm.
ago.
Okay. Yeah, I think I know the one. Yeah. So it's I know you guys are out in different part of the world, so it's still pretty fun to have you guys on the East Coast, and I'm already excited to meet you guys. I haven't talked to you now both. Both you guys are awesome. I'm just gonna say that you're both amazing. I love chatting with you, and this has been so cool to speak with you. Like I said, when I spoke to John, I always had my ulterior motives of I got to get Bonita on this show too. So we did it. So thank you so much, Bonita. Thanks for sharing all your stories and spending this time with us today.
Oh, well, thank you so much. And what a pleasure to get to meet you and speak with you. You seem like a wonderful person as well. And I'm looking forward to us playing around at the
Absolutely.
convention.
Absolutely. Until
Thank
then,
you.
live long and prosper.
Oh, right back at ya.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of Trek Untold. Don't forget to follow us on social media, whether it's on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, or TikTok, all at Trek Untold. If you caught this episode on YouTube, please remember to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment to let me know what you think about this week's guest and the stories that they told. And if you're listening to it on any of the different audio platforms out there, please leave a rating and a review to make sure more folks can find this podcast. If you're in a position to financially support this show, please consider visiting patreon.com/trekuntold. For as little as $1 a month, you can gain access to all sorts of perks, including early access to episodes and the ability to ask questions to my guests as part of these interviews, and be part of the Trek Untold community. Check out my show notes for all the different links to all of these things, as well as a few other things, including my Amazon storefront and places to pick up Trek Untold merchandise. And once again, thank you for watching this week's episode. There's many Star Trek podcasts out there, but we appreciate you choosing this one to enjoy today. Until next time, I'm Matthew. This has been Trek Untold, and until the next time, fortune favors the bold.
Trek Untold, the Star Trek podcast that goes beyond the stars, is powered by the Rageworks Podcast Network and affiliated with Nerd News Today.